Hello, everybody. My name is Marika DeRoos. I am the Communications Coordinator with Heritage Saskatchewan, and I am joined by Rob Truszkowski, Professor at the Department of Visual Arts at the University of Regina. I've asked Rob to speak with me today because we're catching up with those who've won our Lieutenant Governor of Saskatchewan Heritage Awards in years past. In 2019, Rob accepted the award for Intangible Cultural Heritage on behalf of the U of R's Department of Visual Arts for their Letterpress Now initiative. So thank you for joining us, Rob.
It was my pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Could you give our viewers a quick description of what Letterpress Now is?
Yes, well, Letterpress Now it's kind of a project and it's kind of a long-term thing. And essentially, it has everything to do with using what is considered to be obsolete technology, using letterpress. And for people who don't know what that is typically individual tiny pieces of lead type set up and then printed on a press, the way things were printed before we used computer printers. And the project has been really about how I've built up an area that is obsolete and more or less defunct, and I've built it up here at the U of R and have reintroduced it for myself and for my students to make art with it. So we're not doing printing in the 100-year-old tradition. We're using letterpress now, and the title came from a wonderful book called Letterpress Now, and it's always stuck with me because it's not about the past. It's about using what was available in the past to do something in the present.
That's really neat. I'm wondering in what way your students respond to the letterpress area. Does this old way of typesetting and printing inform their art practice in a way that a computer cannot?
Well, absolutely. And I think I probably need to say that I teach printmaking, so it's different than kind of commercial printing or industrial printing in any kind of practical sense. We're artists, and I'm training artists, and I'm an artist, and we're trying to use all of the media of printing and printmaking to make art. So one of the guiding principles in printmaking generally, I think, is about not just moving ahead. Certainly it is about looking at new ways of making, new ways of doing. It's about using technology. Printmaking has always gobbled up technology. But what we don't do, or what I don't do, is spit out the old technology in favor of the new. So when we talk about whether or not students are getting something out of this that they don't get from a computer, that's absolutely the case. But the computer, like letterpress, is a tool, or it's a set of tools. It's also a way of thinking. So what I really love to tell people, when I get people down in the studio here at the U of R and I talk about letterpress in particular, I say a student who is raised entirely in a digital world, in a world where there's very little tactility in the way that maybe slightly older artists know, or my previous generations know, they can start theoretically in the morning with an iPhone. They can take a picture with their iPhone. We can make a digital negative with a computer printer here in the studio. We can bring it into a dark room. We can photographically affix their iPhone photograph onto a piece of polymer letterpress plate material. We can develop it with water, non-toxic, in the dark room. We can take it out. We can stick it on a 120-year-old printing press, and we can attach it, or we can kind of line it up next to 100 or 150-year-old lead type. And so we can really be marrying old and new, and neither of those things, I mean, both that whole process is far more than the sum of the parts. It's not about what's the newest thing. It's not about only looking back. It's about some other thing. And that's the magic of what happens in the studio down here. So the students are into it. They love it. They can't believe that they get to use this strange, heavy machines that move, that they have to operate with their feet. They've got arms going, they've got legs going, they're watching everything, and they're really making a thing, sometimes really from start to finish. So the students are into it. I totally have a crush on letterpress, and I have for a number of years now. It's not my primary focus as an artist. I mostly work in screen printing. But boy, do I really like the opportunity to get on the letterpress stuff, and the students do too.
That's really neat. That bleeds in really well with my next question. So a fundamental notion as part of the concept behind intangible cultural heritage is the transmission of knowledge. So as a professor, of course, the nature of your job is to transmit knowledge. However, you receive this obsolete equipment in a state of disrepair often, and they probably didn't come with a tech help hotline. How did you learn to tune up the machines, and how did you learn how to operate them?
Well, that's a great question, because it's certainly not for everyone, and it's certainly not for the faint of heart. I think it's incremental. I mean, I often will go back in, when I search the kind of depths of my memory, I think about being in my grandfather's basement in Hamilton, Ontario. He was tinkering with something, and I would have a little tool in his vise, and I'd be playing. And for as long as I can remember, I've been, I guess, comfortable with, maybe not confident, because confident and naivete, I think, can be two sides of the same coin. But I was always pretty comfortable with fixing things, or trying to fix things, or working with things, and not really worried about breaking them. And certainly not in a careless fashion. But I've always thought, if you can understand how a thing works, you might be able to use it to your benefit. So starting, I think, probably in university, when I was an undergrad at Queen's, I had some fantastic professors who were they really balanced what it is to be an artist and what it is to be a kind of a technician. And I've always, I think, been drawn to that. So the same way that I renovate my house, the same way that I work on my 45-year-old sports car myself in the wintertime, the same way that I take apart a printing press, the same way that I attempt to figure out how to use a computer or a different particular kind of software or whatever. They're all parts of the same thing. And no, there are no easy answers. There are no instruction manuals. Typically, there's sometimes an older person who's been around a little longer, who knows a little bit more, that can help. But it's really about cobbling all of those things together. There's no one way. I'm not a savant when it comes to machines, and I'm also not going blindly into every single thing that I do and hoping for the best. It's an art and a science, I think, working with any sort of technology, and particularly ones where you have to kind of self-guide. So it's a lot of fun. It keeps me kind of excited and interested, and gets my hands really dirty at times, and then I can shift gears into the less dirty part of my job, the talking to students and talking conceptually about what it is that they do. So yeah, maybe I'm diverging slightly from your question here, but I find it all really fulfilling to have access to a variety of different ways to use my brain in the day.
Yeah, that's really great, and it really gives hope to the idea of reviving these lost arts and these lost methods of doing things. So that's really great. It's nice that you've been able to do that and carry it on for your students. So, yeah. So have there been any updates since 2009 when you won the award?
Yeah, so I think right around the time that the award was coming, I got an email from a former student who's out in Leader, Saskatchewan, and she said, she sent me a text. Rob, I found all this equipment and I'm really excited about it, and I'm not really sure what it is, and you might be able to tell me what it is, and would you like it? And I said, okay, well, send me some pictures. And then ding, 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 I got 20 pictures. And like usual, this is kind of how these things happen. There's a drought in terms of communication and new equipment, and then all of a sudden someone gets in touch and says, oh, I heard from someone that you might be a person who would be interested in this or might want to save it. So Brooke sent me these messages, and I said, oh, that looks like a cool Vandercook letterpress. It looks pretty rough. It's in the back of a slightly dilapidated building that's fallen in due to weather. But if we could somehow get it to Saskatchewan or to Regina, I could do something with it. And we figured out how to get a friend who runs a tow truck company, who comes into Regina for Rough Riders football games, to hook it up to the back of his truck and drive it into Regina on a Friday afternoon. And so, like it goes, a press and a bunch of other stuff I wasn't expecting showed up at the loading dock, and the U of R loading dock people are like, okay, more weird stuff. It's dirty. It's kind of looks kind of broken. And what do you want with it? And I said, be very careful with it, and please put it here. And yeah, I worked on it, and I've got another press up and running. And it complements, it's not entirely different from what I have, but it's not the same. And it complements the suite of machines and things that I have down here. And it's another option for my students to use. And frankly, it's another option or another opportunity for them to see me fixing a thing, because the more they see stuff, whether it's fixing an old machine or making a print or talking about art, the more confidence I think that they gain as artists, potentially now as student artists, and once they're outside the warm embrace of the university.
Oh,
So,
that's interesting. It's all
so
part
yeah,
of the process.
yeah, absolutely. So the project is, I mean, it'll never, I think, quite end. And I imagine that as more and more people find stuff that is in back rooms of buildings that need to be demolished, or storage units that have been abandoned, or basements of old printing shops, it'll continue to find its way here until such time as someone tells me I'm not allowed to put more stuff in the basement.
Right. Oh, that's great. Well, that kind of answers my next question then. I wanted to know if you'd like to continue collecting these big pieces for your collection, so to speak.
Yeah, well, yes, absolutely. And part of it is that, again, they provide more opportunities to make things and to think differently, to exercise our brains as artists in ways that sometimes I think people don't realize that artists do. To be an artist is to be a problem solver. I mean, it's also to be, you know, like the poet. It's also to be the beret and the wine glass and the, you know, it can be all of those things, but it's largely about working really hard. It's largely about figuring out how to solve problems. It is largely about figuring out how to ask the questions that solve the problems. So I continue to want to collect this stuff because I think it's good for all of those reasons. I also really like tinkering with old stuff, so it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy, like I said, cars or renovations, bicycles. I've got too many bicycles. I love fixing machines, and I like making art. And so for me, I find it really personally rewarding, and I think for the students, it's just more for them to have access to. So yes, keep it coming. If you know anybody, keep it coming.
Right. Sounds good. Okay, well, thank you, Rob, so much for taking the time to answer these questions. As you know, our 2020 awards have been canceled, so this is a nice way to shed light on the programs. We're hoping to continue next year. So,
well, it's been my pleasure, and I'm really hoping that you guys continue, because this is such a lovely program, and it's such a nice way to kind of again remind us where we come from and where we're going in life.
That's right. Like that's our entire MO right there. So if you'd like to follow Professor Truszkowski, be sure to follow his Instagram page at Professor Truszkowski. He also has a solo show up at the Slate Fine Art Gallery in Regina. Thank you again, Rob.
My pleasure.
Take care.